Hello everyone. So in this video, we are going to quickly go through what is happening in scenes 6, 7 and 8 of Lear's Daughters. So just to recap what happened in scene 5, we saw King Lear returning from a sporting tournament, and we saw how he was described as a great sportsman, even though he is a man who is in his 60s or 70s. Despite that, because of the power that he signifies, he is considered to be the best sportsman in that country. But we also saw how Lear's influence is waning, decreasing, because the citizens are no longer willing to accept him blindly, and we saw how the crowd was throwing rotten vegetables and fruits at the royal family. In fact, Regan was hit in the face with a rotten tomato or something, right? So all is not well in Lear's kingdom. That is the impression that we got from scene 5. We also, understood that the having three daughters is a very problematic political situation for King Lear, because it is very difficult to divide a country between three people, and it is also difficult because he does not have a male heir. So after his death, the future of the country is also, uh, you know, not decided yet. So that is the background, against which we should read what is happening in these three scenes. So let's go to the first scene 6, and see what is happening there. Okay, so scene 6 is titled The Sisters and Their Mother, and like the title suggests, the scene is all about the relationship between the queen and her daughters. So what we normally expect a relationship to be between daughters and mothers is one of love, one of intimacy and care. But here we see that the queen does not have any time to spare for her daughters, and the daughters are constantly harassing the queen, constantly questioning her, asking her incessant questions, and the queen is altogether fed up with these three daughters that she has. So we cannot sense any sort of intimacy between them, and it is a sort of a very formal or an impersonal relationship that we see between them. You should also remember that in this scene, the 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 queen is played on the stage by the fool, and the scene itself begins with the stage direction that the fool is the queen. So this can be read in another way to indicate the foolishness of the queen, or that the queen is actually being a fool by neglecting her daughters, by not having enough time or energy to care for her own children. So the queen is unable to pay attention to her daughters, and the endless questions with which the daughters assail the queen, that is really saddening. On the one hand, we understand that these children, they don't get any attention from their mother, and on the other hand, we also feel sorry for the queen, who does not have any sort of freedom or time or even health to to have a proper intimate relationship with her daughters. So altogether, we end up feeling sorry for both the children and the mother, and ultimately this creates in us a sort of antagonistic feeling towards the father who is responsible for this whole situation. If King Lear had been a more responsible person, a more loving person, then perhaps the torture through which this family is going through may have been avoided. So This is an indictment. This is a sort of statement of the uselessness of the king in this family. Another aspect of the queen's relationship with King Lear that becomes very obvious in this scene is how she constantly desires to please King Lear. The reason behind this is not clear, but it cannot be love. We don't see any sort of intimate conversations or gestures or any sort of intimacy between King Lear and the Queen. So the fact that the Queen is always concerned about uh, the need to please King Lear is probably based on fear, right? She probably fears King Lear and what he might do to her and also to her daughters. So it is a sort of a self-sacrifice that the queen is performing. She is sacrificing her health. She is devoting all of her attention and time so that she can somehow please King Lear and keep him satisfied so that he will not turn against her and her daughters. And we also understand that one of the reasons for the queen's extreme illness, she's not at all healthy, and that is because she is constantly under pressure to give birth to a male child for King Lear. King Lear wants to assure that his lineage, his kingdom is passed on to a male child after his death. So he is constantly, pressuring her to become pregnant, to have one more child, which could be, a boy. So this is the reason why she is undergoing so much, ill health. So the question that we find ourselves asking as we are reading through this scene is, does the queen actually love King Lear? Does she actually want a male heir? Does she want a son? Or is she doing this out of terror? So once again, the play becomes a sort of indictment of masculinity, about how patriarchy is able to hold women hostage, to sort of hijack the control over their own lives and also of their own bodies. All of this is, very apparent in this scene. So at the very end of scene 6, we find the children having a more serious conversation. Till now, they had been pestering their mother with silly questions, trying to get her attention. But now they realize that their mother is not well, and soon they might be orphans. So here these children, they they are forced to confront the reality that their mother might soon die, and they might be alone, in the care of their father. So these questions of mortality, of death, of the impermanence of life, and of their future as orphans, orphanhood, these questions become very prominent in the last part of this scene. So they directly address their fear. What is their fear? Their fear is, will their mother die? And what will happen to them if she dies? So this possibility is always in the back of their minds. And they are addressing this directly to the queen, and they are asking her, Mother, will you die one day? And what will happen to us once you die? So the overwhelming emotion in the last part of the scene is about uncertainty, right? Uh, the queen, although she had not been a very active participant in their lives, she had been sort of like an anchor, holding all of these lives together, balancing out the ill effects of King Lear as a father, uh, and sort of neutralizing the situation so that life can still go on. So at the end of this scene, we are facing a possible uh, unstable situation which could emerge once the queen dies. In fact, this is foreshadowed because the queen collapses at the end of the scene, and the fool comes on stage and tells us that there are two mothers on stage right now, the mother who is dying and the mother who lives. So Nanny is the one who is referred to by the term the mother who lives, and through the fool's words we try to, or we get the impression that Nanny could become a sort of a substitute mother figure in the daughter's lives. But again, we should remember that scene earlier where the fool, once again, it was the fool who told us that this nanny is a mother who is being paid. She doesn't have any real blood relationship or commitment to the daughters. So her treatment of the daughters is always going to be second best, right? It is not going to be completely wholehearted or sacrificial as the queen's approach to her daughters were. So that is how this scene ends. Coming to scene 7, the title of this scene is The Nurse and the Sisters. This is a sort of a interstitial scene because in the last scene we saw the imminent death of the mother, and in the next scene we will see what happens after her death. So this scene sort of happens at the moment of the queen's death, or at the end of this scene we hear the news that the queen has died. So what happens in the scene is the sisters and the nurse, they are once again portrayed as spending time together, just like in an earlier scene. And just like in that scene, we see the nurse engaging these sisters by telling them certain stories. And these are not true stories. The sisters, they want to know more about their childhood, but rather than telling them the actual reality, rather than engaging them truthfully, we find that the nurse is always coming up with these imaginary narratives, almost mythical narratives, with which she is engaging with these children. For example, in this particular scene, the story that the nurse is telling the sisters is about a reunion which is happening in their family. So for some reason, King Lear had been separated from the family. That is the story. And then after a very difficult time, a time of great danger, King Lear returns to the family and the entire family is reunited. So this is the basic structure of the story that the nurse is trying to tell the children. But she introduces so many unbelievable elements into the story that it becomes almost like a fairy tale or a myth or a folk tale. So look at what she says. She says, "It rained for 40 nights and 40 days. The king walked over the water to meet us." So these are almost miraculous events. A never-ending, spell of rain lasting 40 days, and the king, magically walking over the waters to, reach the family. So these narratives, these elements almost paint the king once again in a sort of a mythical light. It is as if he is beyond human. It is as if he is a demigod of sorts, just like in the earlier scene. You remember the scene where he comes back from the sporting tournament, and although he is very old, everyone agrees that he is a great, a warrior. So that same sort of a approach is seen in this scene as well. Another important thing which is there in this scene is the story is illustrated through a metaphor of everyone crossing a bridge. So Goneril, Regan, Cordelia, the Queen, and King Lear, they all cross a bridge to become united. It is almost like the fairy tale of the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, right? Something which is fantastic happening at the end of a great period of trials and tribulations. So here, King Lear and the daughters, they cross a bridge, and this act of crossing a bridge seems to indicate a sort of a great transition. Why do we cross bridges? In order to overcome some sort of an obstacle. When there is no direct access, we need to find an artificial way of reaching the other side, and that sort of a taking effort to accomplish something which is not normally accomplishable. That is the metaphor which is being represented through this image of everyone crossing a bridge and then becoming reunited. Another interesting aspect of the scene is how the children, they are not completely satisfied with the story that the nanny is telling them. So they add their own bits and pieces to the story and makes it a sort of a collaborative effort. You should remember that this very play is a collaborative effort by the entire women's theater group. It doesn't have a single author. It is a collective effort. So like that, the children also modify the story that the nanny is telling them, and they change it, they reconfigure it, and they expand upon it in various ways. So while all this storytelling is happening, uh, a very important or saddening aspect of reality seems to occur, and that is the death of the queen. So the news reaches the children at the end of the scene that their mother has died, and we see how the children react and what happens to them. Their future is not at all secure, and there is every chance that bad things might happen to them. And we see what happens in the next scene. Okay. Scene 8 is titled Funeral Preparations. So, in this scene, we understand that the family is preparing for the funeral of the queen, and the the scene begins with a sort of a contradictory declaration. Okay, the fool declares that the queen is dead, long live the queen. So this statement is fashioned after the commonly uttered statement, the king is dead, long live the king. So this is normally spoken immediately after the death of the king, and this is to reassure the subjects of a kingdom that although the previous king is dead, immediately we have a new king and the kingdom is going to continue. So it is a sort of a statement which um, reinforces the stability of the kingdom. Right? When one king dies, immediately somebody else becomes the king. But here in this particular scene, what is going to happen after the queen's death is not certain. We don't know whether the king is going to marry somebody else, or whether one of the daughters is going to become like a queen, discharging the same functions that the queen used to do in the king's court. So everything is undecided. So will one of the daughters take over the duties performed by the queen is one of the questions that we encounter in the scene, and we see that Goneril, she is preparing to take over as the new power figure in the court. So she's although she is extremely saddened and shocked at the death of her mother, she is also glad that this event will be a kind of a punishment for her father. Till now her father had been neglecting all of his royal duties and expecting the queen to take care of all of these things. But now, with the queen's absence, Godril is glad that the king will have to finally find time to do something. And she's also preparing to set herself up as a kind of a very powerful figure in this kingdom. Now, Gondrel is also planning to sort of be a substitute mother figure in her sisters' lives. As the eldest sister, she also feels responsible for the well-being of her younger sisters, and um, so we see her ascending into a sort of a mother figure. At the same time, Cordelia, the youngest daughter, she is very aware of her special bond with her father. She knows very well that she is her father's favorite, and she too wants to become a very constant supporting presence in her father's life. But the only problem is that she is not recognized as a grown up, and therefore she lacks authority or any sort of power in this particular setup. So she is also expecting that in the at least in the long term, she will become a sort of a supplement to her father. But then the scene ends with a very traumatic incident. As the queen's funeral preparations are going on, all of the sisters and the nurse are there in their room. They are putting on black dresses in order to signify their sadness at the death of the queen. When Gondrel looks out of the window of this room, in the distance, she sees her father molesting another woman. So you should remember that this is happening on the day of the queen's funeral. His wife has just died, and he is already, molesting another woman in plain sight, in public. He is not even trying to conceal it. He is not trying to, put on the appearance of being sad at his wife's death. He is immediately doing something utterly morally disgusting as this. So Gondrel and Regan, they see this and they prevent Cordelia from seeing this. They know that Cordelia is enamored by her father. She considers her father as a sort of a very, very powerful figure, somebody who is very, iconic in her life. So Gordon and Regan doesn't want to spoil that sort of image that Lear has in Cordelia's mind. So seeing this, Gordon is immediately thinking about her own future prospects. If Lear is planning to marry somebody else, then of course he will want to have another male child, right? He doesn't have male children as of now. So if King Lear marries somebody else and there is a male child, then naturally all of the sisters, Gondrel, Regan and Cordelia, they will not have any right on the kingdom. The entire kingdom will pass on to the male child. So this is more worrying for Gondrel, and this sort of sets up an even greater hatred inside her mind for what her father is doing. Apart from this, one more thing that we find in this scene is how the the citizens, the people of King Lear's kingdom, are growing more and more impatient with their king. They understand that the king is not the perfect person that he projects himself to be. He is a very fallible human being and often a very immoral person. So the citizens of the country are turning against him, and slowly we have another, a sort of a sign of impending war or rebellion or revolution or whatever. So things are going from bad to worse and from unstable to extremely unstable, and that is where we end this scene. So I will end this video now, and let me see if I can post a few questions for discussion, and we will continue with this in the next class. And do try to read the next 3 scenes for the next class. And similar to this video, I will prepare a sort of a PowerPoint presentation with audio recordings explaining what is going on in the next 3 scenes. Thank you.